Wouldn't it be great if you could ask your data anything at any time? Like, how are sales this quarter? How's the new marketing campaign performing? What does the overall health of the company look like? And actually get answers right away with charts and graphics and actionable information. You can with Domo's AI and data products platform. Domo lets you channel AI and data quickly, securely, and innovatively to deliver measurable insights wherever and whenever you need them. Anyone on your team can use Domo to easily prepare, analyze, visualize, automate, and distribute data, all amplified by AI. Domo goes beyond productivity. It's designed to transform your processes, helping you make smarter and faster decisions and drive real growth. All powered by Domo's trust, flexibility, and years of expertise in data and AI innovation. The world's best companies rely on Domo to make smarter decisions. See how Domo can help transform yours. Learn more at ai.domo.com. That's ai.domo.com.
The Agile brand.
Welcome to Season 6 of the Agile brand, where we discuss marketing technology and customer experience trends, insights, and ideas with enterprise and technology platform leaders. We focus on the people, processes, data, and platforms that make brands successful, scalable, customer-focused, and sustainable. This is what makes an Agile brand. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom, advising Fortune 1000 brands on MarTech, marketing operations, and CX, best-selling author and speaker. The Agile Brand Podcast is brought to you by TechSystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that my latest book, Priority is Action: 7 Principles for Better Strategies, Decisions, and Outcomes, is now available. In it, I give ideas and insights for leaders and teams that need to make meaningful progress on their priorities. After all, our priorities are what we do, not what we say we'd like to do. You can find Priority is Action on Amazon or learn more on my website, gregkihlstrom.com. Now let's get on to the show. It didn't take long, but the world is awash in generative AI-based content, and let's face it, a lot of it isn't great. But that's not the way it has to be. Today we're going to talk about how to utilize generative AI for on-brand content creation and why paying attention to the details matter here. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Jon Ricketts, CEO and co-founder of Writerly. Jon, welcome to the show.
Hey, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, looking forward to talking about this with you. Why don't we get started with you just giving a little background on yourself and what you're currently doing at Writerly.
Yeah, sure. So I'm about a dozen years deep into a SaaS career, either as an early stage operator or co-founder, or in the case of Writerly, the founder. But have been working a lot with automation tools, workflow automation, in and around the fintech space, primarily within workflow automation around client onboarding and things like that. And several years ago, was turned on to some of the early generative AI, right around the time of the transformer model, sort of becoming a little more popular and getting a little bit more visibility. And it was very clear to see from that point that there were some really interesting use cases that were ahead of us. In a lot of ways, I still think that we're extremely early in the generative AI space. It may not feel or sound that way, but we've had a long runway ahead of us when it comes to that. But going back, it was very clear to see this is really interesting technology. And from a content perspective, from an automation perspective, it wasn't difficult to see that there was so much opportunity, but it was incumbent upon some of the early companies, and even the companies now, to really figure out what those use cases were and what the true economic value to be found within those use cases was going to be.
Great. So, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I mean, there's certainly already. I agree with you that I think we're in early stages here of Gen AI and stuff, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't gotten off to a pretty quick start here. So, let's talk about some of the challenges that we face. Maybe somewhat because it has gotten off to such a quick start, but also just as something relatively early in stages of development. I think there is a lot to work out still. So, as I mentioned as well, it's certainly becoming easier to generate AI based content. Plenty of platforms out there, plenty of ways to do it. And there's certainly more of that content, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're seeing better content. sometimes, better is not better, or more is not better. What are some of the common shortcomings that improper use of generative AI, or just mediocre use, maybe produces?
Yeah, I think the top shortcoming is sort of a failure to live up to a perceived expectation from the user. A lot of people approach generative AI, whether it's ChatGPT or Writerly or another writing platform, is that it's this sort of magical place that creates sort of what's in their head. They have
Yeah.
an image of what's in their head, and what comes out from the output side may not meet that expectation. And so we kind of have to take a step back and say, well, the outputs are really only as good as sort of the input instructions, and people need to think about, the input is can be a very specific, and needs to be a very specific set of instructions. The thing about large language models, and the amount of data that are contained within these models, and the fact that they are probabilistic in nature, is that they can do these computations very quickly around what the model believes should be the next correct sequence of either tokens, words, sentences, etc. But for really what I would like to, call kind of a first pass, first version, being this early, these models are very good at sort of guessing and extrapolating as to what comes next. But when you give it a limited input, a limited set of instructions, the outputs can reflect that as well.
Yeah, yeah. And so that definitely that leads to the idea of getting better at prompts. And certainly we've seen prompt engineer job titles pop up, and all sorts of things
Mhm.
like that. But and I have thoughts about that as a distinct role versus as kind of a role that's going to eventually work into everybody's job description, whether they like it or not, in this year. Or I think it's eventually going to happen. But it does point to this need to just become better at the inputs, right? So how do you see a balance between people as a skill learning to create better prompts versus the software itself making prompt writing easier? Is it a
Yeah.
little bit of each? Is it both? Is it what do you see?
Well, I think you said it. It's a blend of both. I think, and I share your sentiment on, right now we see a lot of job postings around prompt engineers, and that's a very valuable skill set, so on and so forth. But I think the further we get down the road, it's going to be incumbent upon all of us, regardless
Yeah.
of background or role, to know our way around prompting in some degree.
Yeah.
Because what we're seeing right now is moving from large language models into this transition, particularly in the workforce for companies, either at the SMB, mid market, or enterprise level. You're going to be needing to have prompt skills, because you're going to be working with your own custom data sets, and doing things that are outside of a Chat GPT environment or a Writerly environment, and inside custom data, to be able to create outputs that are meaningful and relevant to your work. So I think, from that perspective, we're
Yeah.
all going to have to get better.
Yeah.
But I think, too, there's a blend, right? I think software exists, particularly at the application layer, to make lives easier, to make work a little easier, and not for convenience sake, but from a value perspective. And right now we kind of treat, and we talk about prompting as having an assistant, or maybe an intern, or maybe a coworker that's new.
Yeah.
You really have to educate. You have to tell it specifically what you want to do, the tasks you want it to perform. And then you sit back and you're able to sort of adjudicate how it handled that task. And then from there, you can continue to refine or address things that may be missing, or reinforce things that were good. So in a lot of ways, right now, it's no different than having somebody that's new to your team, and you're having to really tell it. So
Yeah.
getting really specific and really granular is a benefit. But that being said, we can't spend all of our time learning how to prompt, and there prompting exercises can occur over days or weeks or even months.
Yeah.
It's never really finished. So I think there's going to be a blend of perhaps some software that's going to be able to help us in our prompting, that's going to be able to sort of guess from a position of, I think this is what you're trying to arrive at. Let's put some macros up to be able to shorten the amount of text that we have to type, or the words that we have to speak. So it's
Yeah.
going to be exciting to see how this goes. But again, like we're just at the starting line here, And where we are, it's a really good place. It's not as raw as some might want to say or believe that it is.
Yeah, agreed. And talking about what makes good content, another key component of it is, the you could call it the voice, the purpose, the reason to exist, as well as, from a brand and from a marketer's perspective, that brand voice of, this feels like it's coming from me or my brand or whatever, not just a generic response, let's say, to a prompt. Where do current Gen AI tools maybe miss the mark here or not go far enough, and how do you solve for that?
That's a great question. Specifically within our customer base, we work with a lot of large brands that have very distinct voices. And not surprisingly, one of the first concerns that we want to address when we engage in new partnerships is how do we refine the models that are going to be responsible for producing their content to a place where it sounds, and feels like it's coming from, their brand voice. It's very, very important. So I think, early on we saw outputs that sound like what the large language models want to sound like. And there's no tone, there's no character. It's just very, very robotic.
Yeah.
But as we got into certainly building out the rest of our platform and a lot of our features, brand voice became increasingly clear that if you can't solve for that, you're going to have a very difficult time with some of the use cases that are out there. So for us, content production in the world that's sort of consumer facing and public facing, we had to go after that very, very hard early on. And so, how we did it was through really a pathway of content moderation that encompassed a much larger suite of things. We find errors, what some people might consider they sort of misnomer it as hallucinations. I've got my own thoughts about that word. It's really just a false positive. It's what the model thinks from a probabilistic standpoint should come next, but it may not be. So we like to call them false positives. They're typically not as wild as sort of the word hallucination goes. But we approached it from an entire content moderation perspective. And so model one for us is nailing brand voice. Model two for us, and once that is passed there, model two for us is sort of syntax and accuracy, making sure that it's saying what it's supposed to say. And then sort of our third model approach in this is around the content structure itself and making sure that from a structural perspective, it's appropriate to go and be sort of placed wherever it's going to be consumer facing. And I think the approach is not just a one model refinement. It's got to be a multi-model system of filters that sort of, it can either start or it can end with brand voice, but you have to satisfy other components in there as well, because we've also found that even if you nail brand voice, there's still other elements that would probably detract from it being welcome to be published.
Right.
But brand voice, I would say, particularly with the brands and the retailers that we work with, is very high up on the list.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, it could be in the brand's voice, but saying something completely ridiculous,
exactly.
And therefore,
Yeah.
It's very, very strong on one, not so much on the other.
Wouldn't it be great if you could ask your data anything at any time? Like, how are sales this quarter? How's the new marketing campaign performing? What does the overall health of the company look like? And actually get answers right away with charts and graphics and actionable information. You can with Domo's AI and data products platform. Domo lets you channel AI and data quickly, securely, and innovatively to deliver measurable insights wherever and whenever you need them. Anyone on your team can use Domo to easily prepare, analyze, visualize, automate, and distribute data, all amplified by AI. Domo goes beyond productivity. It's designed to transform your processes, helping you make smarter and faster decisions and drive real growth. All powered by Domo's trust, flexibility, and years of expertise in data and AI innovation. The world's best companies rely on Domo to make smarter decisions. See how Domo can help transform yours. Learn more at ai.domo.com. That's ai.domo.com.
You mentioned, your company works with large organizations. I work with large enterprise organizations in my consulting and advisory as well, and so certainly have seen AI's and specifically generative AI's impact on those organizations. But one of the things that I find really interesting and noteworthy about generative AI in particular is that not only does it work and can it work really well in with those large enterprise orgs, but it can have a very big impact on small organizations as well, and really everything in between. And first, just curious, how, if you agree with that, and what does something like that mean in terms of a type of technology? Are there benefits to something like that?
Yeah, it's a great point. And we certainly see it as well. Yeah, I think this technology is scalable at all points on the spectrum, from SMB up to enterprise. But where we kind of find the real value is, there's nothing that's off the shelf. You can't just go buy generative AI and expect there to be outcomes. There has to be a level of, I think it really kind of starts with intellectual curiosity. What are we trying to solve for? Where do we really need to improve? And can we leverage generative AI to do that? And so to go down that sort of thought process is incumbent, regardless of the size of the organization. But where we find the most impact, and you may see this as well, or you might disagree, but the companies that tend to lean in early and have a level of curiosity to say, we want to explore this and we want to get better. This is a new skill set. It's not yes, it's a new technology, but it's a new skill set in the fact that the technology has to be refined. It has, there's an infinite amount of unique use cases for this. And so I think the companies, the teams, and the people that really lean in early and start to experiment and see, hey, this works, this doesn't. This worked really well. Oh, I hope this was going to work, but now, it doesn't. You've got to understand, how you can use this tool and where it's going to make the greatest difference. I see, large enterprise organizations benefiting tremendously from Gen AI that have the right infrastructure in place, that have the right teams in place. But you have leadership at a lot of these companies that are saying, look, go out, explore, experiment, find where the greatest impact can be made. Yeah. And those companies that are leaning into that are clearly, they're finding new applications with their own data sets. They're uncovering new insights. I mean, it's really remarkable what they're able to do. And then you have large companies that are quite content saying, we're very hesitant. We want to wait and see what's going to happen. And you still, kind of fall into this, manual task trap that contributes to a lot of economic waste. But, I think, whether you're small, whether you're large, those that are leaning in and saying, hey, we're gonna figure this out to some degree are going to win. Then we're seeing them win early and often.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I do agree. It's granted, it is software, at the end of the day. But I agree with you that it's almost a way of working that's the biggest. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest. It's almost a philosophical shift, and those that are afraid they're going to lose their jobs, and there's a quote that's already been used too much, even though it's only a few months old. Of like, I think it's something to the effect of, you should be less afraid of losing your job to AI than losing your job to someone who knows how to use AI well. Is kind of the operative thing here. Of it's a way of working with something that is, generally you said it at the top of the show, like it's a helper, it's an assistant, it's it's that kind of thing. It's not like a piece of software that you use completely in a silo. It's when it's used well.
That's a good point you make. We were on a customer call a few weeks ago, and there was a statement that was similar that was made, talking about sort of the adoption and embrace of AI inside the company's culture. Yeah. And they said, for those that don't like change, they're really going to hate extinction.
Right. That's a good one. Yeah.
While a little heavy-handed in the delivery, I think there's a lot of truth that, this is here to stay, and it's something that we're all going to be working with, for a long time, because it does drive a lot of meaningful value in a lot of different ways. It's up to us to sort of uncover it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you touched on a couple things about your platform, Writerly, but I wanted to talk a little more specifically about it as well. So, what would you say are, some of the differentiators with Writerly, and, what gaps does it fill? You mentioned a little bit about target customers, but maybe talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, so we're a diversified generative AI company in the sense that Writerly is it happens to be the corporate name, but it's also a product, and it's a very horizontal sort of general writing tool and helper that's templated and provides some really unique access to some novel templates. The other product that we've released in the past few months is called Ecom. It's ekom.ai, and that's really a more vertical application for digital storefront product management. And where we see, in the case of ecom, the biggest opportunity is in automation and scale through generative AI. And these, when I talk about our customers, these are large brands, typically in excess of 10,000, 20,000 products in their catalog, all the way up to hundreds of thousands. And the real need to have not only effective copywriting from a structure and accuracy standpoint, but a brand voice perspective, and then to be able to apply that with automation and then at scale. We were talking about that many products inside a catalog that potentially need optimized for SEO keyword changes that change with the market, the broader search market. Those are the places that we find, particularly, in our instance, that we can drive the most value is in leveraging generative AI. Is that we've gone down the road over the past 14 months. We sort of understand very intimately prompting. We understand, content moderation, and then, quite frankly, how to package this in a composable software that doesn't just require our customers to come into a new sandbox or to a new piece of their tech stack. We want it to integrate and work, where they're spending most of their time. And so that's where we chose to focus. And we found that some of the best applications of generative AI are simply just addressing current pain points. And those current pain points are typically in processes that involve a lot of manual work. And so, we see, and we get it as well, the question about, well, you're gonna put copywriters, out of work. And, our response to that is, you've got these really talented copywriters that are on your team. And we would challenge you to say, why do you want very skilled copywriters spending a lot of time on product descriptions and product architecture,
right,
when there's other content needs in terms of long form and things across, other areas of marketing that are far more sort of, work up to the level of your licensure type stuff. That's where we kind of want to live. And we've done a really nice job. The team's done a really nice job of overcoming a lot of initial hesitancy and really proving that, hey, this works. This works really, really well. We don't produce these false positives or hallucinations. And it's a very simple software to use for a manual problem that doesn't really scale that well.
Yeah. I mean, definitely e-commerce, I think, is a huge. I'll have to have you back on the show. We could talk just about e-commerce alone, because I think there's so much, and also, when we talk about personalizing e-commerce, so you mentioned, company has even 10,000 SKUs, not even more than that, but they have 5 audience segments in 20 countries, and I can't do the math right now, but that's a lot. We'll just put it that way.
Right.
And to your point, I'm certainly more what they would call an optimist when it comes to all this stuff. So, certainly I hear the concerns about people losing jobs and all that. I generally think when there's a huge technology shift, more jobs are created, just different jobs. And so we need to focus a lot on education and upskilling and things like that. But, I liken it to, and some people listening may not love this, but, there's shortages in other industries, like, driving trucks and fast food restaurants and stuff like that. And, there's concern about replacing those jobs with AI, but they can't find people to actually do the job, or they can't find enough people to do the jobs. And, so to your point about writing copy for product descriptions, is that a great use of a copywriter's time? Well, the general strategy and the beginning parts of that, I think, is a great use of a copywriter. But to this point, writing 1,000 variations of that one product description, maybe, not so much, right?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that sounds really interesting, and like there's some really good use cases already being used for. Do you see a point where maybe companies go overboard? Is there such a thing as too much AI, or how do brands find the right balance, so that they are using humans for what humans do best, and likewise with AI?
There's overboard for everything, right?
Sure.
I don't know. It's an interesting question to think about.
Yeah.
It's fun to think about what does even an enterprise level organization look like that has adopted AI, across every department, right?
Yeah.
From HR to marketing to sales to, even the C-suite. I think that's going to become more common. My only recommendation from just being in this world for a few years now and working with customers and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work is that, I think there's much like, you've heard the term, you can fall in love with a spreadsheet and get drunk on a spreadsheet pretty easily. You can do the same with AI. And I think you really have to judge it through the lens of what value is this returning? I mean, look, we have an AI company that's diversified in its product offering. And the most important assets to our company are our people. These are humans that are still making decisions, people that are still making decisions about where to deploy AI. And that's never going to, never say never, but it's going to be a long time before you have, communication taking a back seat
Right.
to statistical regression models making every single decision. So I don't know. I think right now is a time to play an experiment. And I think the companies are going to come out of this and win the most are the ones that had that enough curiosity to say, hey, let's try this.
Yeah.
The ones that are fearful and sort of rigid in their approach to adoption, we're already seeing it. I think the gap is going to continue to widen, and you kind of know what that does. It creates panic and a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of much worse decisions tend to fall after that gets recognized.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I think those that are slow to move, we're going to see those results. I mean, we're probably already seeing them, but like we're going to see the results of that within a few years, not within a decade, or things are going to rapidly shift for those that are just kind of behind on all of this. I think that's it's yet to be determined, exactly how quickly, but I think we're going to see it pretty soon.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah. Well, Jon, thanks so much for joining the show. One last question before we wrap up here. You've given a lot of great advice, a lot of great insights already. What's one next best action you'd recommend for those listening that want to get started improving results they're getting from their AI-based content?
So what we found is there's what's come about beyond just new software companies that are offering this. I think the people they're out on social media, they're on Twitter, they're on LinkedIn, they're creating courses. There's a lot of content being created around how do you create better content.
Yeah,
and I think those are fantastic resources. YouTube has tutorials. I think I'm a big believer of sort of an immersive learning experience. There's certainly a lot of things that you can go online and find for free that talks about prompting and elevated prompting and model refinement and fine tuning and things like that. But I think my biggest sort of position on it is just get in there and start to play around with it. Start to learn what the responses are. The foundation models are getting better and better and better with each release. And so that's going to relieve a lot of the burden. But I think the biggest way to learn is just to jump in. And, the nice part is you don't have to do anything that's extremely risky early on. It starts small, kind of build up your skills and see what happens.
Yeah, love it. Well, again, I'd like to thank Jon Ricketts, CEO and co-founder of Writerly, for joining the show. You can learn more about Jon and Writerly by following the links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening to the Agile Brand, brought to you by Tech Systems. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.gregkillstrom.com. That's GregKilstrom.com. awash.com. While you're there, check out my series of best-selling Agile brand guides covering a wide variety of marketing technology topics, or you can search for Greg Kihlstrom on Amazon. The Agile brand is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content. Until next time, stay agile.
The Agile brand.